During World War II, Hallicrafters in Chicago built $150 million worth of military radio equipment for the United States Armed Forces. Their transmitters coordinated Allied operations from the frozen Aleutian Islands to the deserts of North Africa. The Army awarded them medals for production excellence. By 1945, Hallicrafters had more cash, more factory space, and more engineering talent than at any point in the company's history. So how does a company like that end up bankrupt and forgotten within a few decades? It was the early 1930s, and a man named William Halligan was setting up a workshop in a tiny leased space at 417 North State Street in Chicago. Halligan had been working with radios since his teens in Boston, building spark gap transmitters and earning his amateur license before commercial radio even existed as an industry. At 16, he was already employed as a ship's radio operator. When World War I broke out, he operated wireless equipment aboard the battleship Illinois. After the war, he moved through college, journalism, and eventually commercial radio sales. While working for the Deutschmann Corporation in Boston, Halligan actually suggested naming their small downtown retail outlet Radio Shack, a term borrowed from the cramped wooden rooms that housed radio gear on ships. That name outlived almost everything else he ever touched. When Halligan launched his own company in Chicago, he fused his surname with the word crafters to signal hand-built quality. But Hallicrafters almost collapsed before producing a single receiver. RCA controlled a monopoly on essential radio circuit patents and sued Halligan for infringement almost immediately. His solution was sharp. In 1933, he acquired a failing company called Silver Marshall, not for its inventory, but for its existing RCA patent license. That one transaction gave Hallicrafters the legal right to exist. Halligan's manufacturing philosophy broke from every convention of the era. While competitors poured money into ornate wooden cabinets designed to look like living room furniture, he stripped all of that away. Every cent went into the chassis. Better components, tighter circuit design, more selectivity and sensitivity at the tuning dial. The amateur radio community responded. By 1938, Hallicrafters had earned a place among the Big Three, dominant American shortwave manufacturers, alongside National Radio Company and Hammarlund. Sales records confirm they were exporting to 89 countries. If Hallicrafters had stayed in that lane, building premium radios for a loyal global hobbyist base, this story would have a very different ending. When the Second World War arrived, Hallicrafters shut down every civilian production line and threw the full weight of the company behind the Allied war effort. The financial leap was staggering. Before Pearl Harbor, annual revenue sat at $2 million. By December 1943, the Chicago Tribune reported the company had delivered $44 million in specialized military radio equipment. By the time the war ended, the total reached $150 million in government contracts. The signature product was the BC 610 transmitter, a 450-watt unit originally designed as a commercial model in 1938. The military integrated it into the SCR 299, a mobile communications truck that gave field commanders reliable high-frequency radio in the worst conditions on Earth. Those trucks saw deployment in the frozen Aleutian Islands, the dense jungles of New Guinea, the dust of El Alamein, and the shattered streets of Bastogne. Signal Corps operators trusted the equipment because it simply refused to fail. In Glasgow, Scotland, a Hallicrafters Sky Champion receiver was reportedly pulled from underneath half a ton of rubble after a German bombing raid and powered on without issue. That's the kind of durability that earns you medals. The United States government awarded Hallicrafters the Army-Navy E Award for production excellence multiple times over. The peace that followed in 1945 should have been a launching pad, and for a while it was. Hallicrafters re-entered civilian markets with deep cash reserves, a hardened supply chain, and factory capacity that dwarfed competitors. They brought in Raymond Loewy, one of the most famous industrial designers in the world, to restyle their consumer products. The S-38 receiver that Loewy helped shape in 1947 became the gateway radio for an entire generation of post-war shortwave listeners. By 1952, Hallicrafters employed 2,500 workers across more than 500,000 square feet of factory space in Chicago's North Lawndale neighborhood. Their catalog had expanded into AM and FM radios, television sets, phonographs, and high-performance amateur transmitters like the HT-32, which dominated the global single-sideband market after 1957. And in parallel, behind heavily secured doors, Hallicrafters was operating as a classified defense contractor. They engineered electronic warfare suites for B-52 Stratofortress nuclear bombers, and they built guidance and telemetry components for the Atlas YCBM and the Nike Zeus anti-ballistic missile system. The same company selling clock radios for American kitchens was building radar jammers designed to help nuclear warheads bypass Soviet air defenses. But Hallicrafters was not just operating on two fronts, it was dependent on both of them. And by the mid-1960s, both fronts started collapsing at the same time. The first blow came directly from the United States government. In 1967, the Federal Communications Commission began implementing a regulatory framework called incentive licensing, pushed heavily by the American Radio Relay League. The new rules stripped general and conditional class amateur operators of their access to prime high-frequency phone bands on 75, 40, 20, and 15 meter bands. Those frequencies were reserved exclusively for advanced and extra-class licensees. The stated goal was to encourage operators to upgrade their technical skills. The actual result was a disaster. Thousands of ham radio operators, suddenly locked out of up to half their preferred bands, stopped buying new equipment entirely. Wayne Green, publisher of 73 magazine, publicly warned the regulation would gut the industry. Nobody listened. Then, from across the Pacific, the second blow landed. Japanese electronics firms like Yaesu, ICOM, and Kenwood began exporting advanced, solid-state transceivers into the American market at prices no domestic manufacturer could match. These companies had lower labor costs, no massive defense overhead, and modern transistor-based architectures that made Hallicrafters' heavy, tube-powered equipment feel like relics from another decade. American consumers, already bitter about their restricted licenses, abandoned decades of brand loyalty overnight and bought Japanese. Hallicrafters was hemorrhaging on both sides. Domestic demand had evaporated because of the FCC. Foreign competition had destroyed their pricing power, and the defense contracts they had grown dependent on were cyclical and unpredictable. In 1966, Bill Halligan sold the entire company to the Northrop Corporation for just over $13 million. Northrop was an aerospace and defense giant. It had no interest in consumer electronics or amateur radio. Northrop wanted the electronic countermeasures technology and the missile systems division. Nothing else. The dismantling was surgical. Northrop closed the historic North Lawndale factory in Chicago, moved operations to a secure facility in Rolling Meadows, Illinois, and quietly killed off civilian production. A shrinking trickle of amateur radios shipped through 1972 before the line was terminated. By 1975, the Hallicrafters name was peeled off the building entirely. The facility became Northrop's Defense Systems Division. The brand drifted into the hands of strangers. Northrop sold the name to a Dallas outfit called Breaker Corporation, which hauled 14 truckloads of old parts and schematics to Texas and tried rebranding cheap imported radios with the Hallicrafters badge. That effort failed by 1980. The name then passed to a Miami businessman who chased military contracts with it. That effort failed as well. In 1988, the last corporate shell declared bankruptcy in San Antonio, and a judge handed the intellectual property to court-appointed trustees. The rights have been frozen there ever since. William Halligan died in Miami Beach on July 14, 1992, at the age of 93. He had kept his amateur radio license active to the very end, still transmitting under the call signs he had carried for decades. Today, no factory produces Hallicrafters equipment. The brand is legally dead, but the radios themselves endure. Collectors around the world still chase down those heavy steel receivers and transmitters that rolled out of Chicago. The warm glow of vacuum tubes behind a glass dial. The mechanical precision of a tuning knob that was built to survive a war, and did. These are the remnants of something that no longer exists. An era when one American company could build a living room radio and a Cold War weapons system under the same roof. That era ended. Hallicrafters is the proof that it was real.